Put all the James Harden news to the side. Put all the Embiid concerns to the side. Today, I want to talk about something positive in the Sixers world, with that being Tyrese Maxey. In this video, I'm going to jump into what the most recent comments were made about expectations for Tyrese Maxey this year, him potentially taking another leap forward, and what that overall means for the Sixers as a whole. James Harden obviously impacts Tyrese Maxey more so than any player on this roster when I mean what his role is when he's there versus when he isn't. So I want to just discuss things and break things down from here. Now, before I dive fully into it, I do want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. As of now, 88.5% of you guys watching this video have not clicked subscribe yet. Does us a lot of good, helps us out a ton on this channel, and we have some awesome content and big plans coming up that I do not want you guys to miss out on. So make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell. So for now, I want to dive into the topic of the day, which is, of course, Tyrese Maxey and the expectations for this season. Maxey was his shining self at Media Day, brought the personality as expected, was interrupted Joel Embiid's press conference himself to give a little love to his podcast, Maxey on the mic, so got to love the marketing there as well. But what specifically got me excited, I want to start with this quote from Nick Nurse here. So number one is Nick Nurse spoke on a plan A and plan B regarding whether James Harden is there or not. In his plan without Harden, Nurse states, quote, "The first thing is Tyrese gets the ball in his hands a lot more. So that's just automatically is going to give him opportunities for pace. That's going to give him opportunities for offensive creation, both for himself and to his teammates. It's going to give him experience in reading defense. He'll have to go through a learning curve with that, but I think the short answer is he's going to get more chances." This is music to my ears. Hand the keys to the franchise. It is time for Tyrese Maxey to take over because he's ready. We have never seen a player in NBA history make leaps like Tyrese Maxey has. And I'm going to circle back to that topic there specifically in a minute. But first, I want to jump on this specific role. So basically what Nick Nurse is saying, and this has been one of the things that he has talked about since he first came to Philadelphia. At his introductory press conference, one of the expectations that he laid out for Tyrese Maxey is he wants him to make more decisions in a pick and roll. What specifically and I'm sure Nick Nurse and the rest of the Sixers organization will be looking out for at the start of this year, assuming that there is no James Harden on the court, which is very up in the air. And I just dropped a video talking about his plans for training camp. Make sure you guys check that one out as well. But assuming that James Harden is not on the court, Tyrese Maxey essentially becomes the default point guard for this team. Yes, there's guys like Patrick Beverley that can step in and play some minutes, but Maxey is going to be the engine of the offense in the way the team needs. What we don't know to this point in time is Tyrese Maxey capable of being a point guard? That is the million-dollar question. Obviously, by his frame, that he is kind of point guard size, but he is a score-first guy. His natural instinct is to score the basketball. So what I'm excited to see is he capable of growing into a true point guard, a guy that can run an offense, make decisions in the pick and roll, create for his teammates. I've seen it in flashes. There's been moments where I can see growth in this area, and the biggest thing that gives me optimism is that anytime this kid is challenged, he finds a way to get the job done. That I just believe in Tyrese Maxey from a growth and talent standpoint, that he is good enough as a basketball player, he's a smart enough individual, and he's so hardworking that he will find a way to get it done. I believe in him. Now, let's say there's a world where that does not happen, where Tyrese Maxey never becomes proficient as a guy that's reading a defense, calling an offense, all of these things. That's still okay. He's still a very good basketball player. If he has to be a score-first player, that's fine. There is a world for that. He was a 20-plus point per game scorer last year, and the Sixers need guys to put the ball in the basket. That is the name of the entire game. But that does change things from a Sixers standpoint of what you surround Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid with. At this point in time, the unfortunate reality is Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid are the two centerpieces of the team. Everything around that is still up in the air. That's why we're seeing so many one-year deals when we talk about the Patrick Beverleys, the Mo Bambas, the Kelly Oubres, guys like that being brought in that, yes, they help for this season, but it's also not a long-term commitment. That when we do run the same show back next offseason, that there's a chance that none of these faces return. That's the reality. So finding what Tyrese Maxey is as a player plays a major role in what you have to surround him with. Does that mean that there has to be a guy that can be the true point guard on this roster? It might, but it might not, because I do believe he can grow into the area as a playmaker. Now, I want to touch on what Maxey said specifically about Harden when he was asked. Maxey said, quote, "As a brother, I love James. Me and James have become close over the last, maybe 2 years, year and a half, however long it's been. So, of course, we hope that he comes in and plays. That's always cool. And for myself and our teammates, we got to keep going out there and playing through all situations. Plan A, plan B, like Nick Nurse says, and be ready for whatever life brings us." Great attitude, pretty scripted. I think the Sixers were pretty on the same page as far as having a response regarding James Harden. I do like this plan A and plan B kind of message that they are sharing, because that's the unfortunate reality, that the team is going to look drastically different if there's a James Harden on the floor versus if he's not. So that's kind of what the situation they are dealing with. I do like Maxey. And I also, regardless of how things are and how bad things are now, it was a good thing for Tyrese Maxey to take in how James Harden analyzes a game and goes through his process at this point. I think he probably took less from Harden from like a game day standpoint. A lot of times we hear about young guys taking in from vets like the way they manage games, the way they go through their pregame routine. That is not stuff that I think Harden probably helped Maxey with. If anything, Maxey's significantly the harder worker out of just about everyone in the entire NBA at this point. But just how does James Harden make his decisions on a basketball court? How does he read a defense? What is he looking for? Some of his movements. We saw a little, influence from these step-back threes added to Tyrese Maxey's game throughout the past 2 years. I love seeing that. You can't ask for much of a better person to sit Tyrese Maxey behind and have him learn from than James Harden. He's one of few guys who has led the NBA in both scoring and assists. The potential for Tyrese Maxey is sky high, but the reality is he may never be a James Harden, and this is an awesome guy for him to learn from. Now let's talk a little more about Tyrese Maxey as a player specifically and where I see his route for growth. I want to start by pulling up his stats here and just looking at how massive the growth was. Right here. And number one, last year he averaged 20.3 points per game, 3.5 assists, 2.9 rebounds, shot 48.1% from the field, and 43.4% from three. That 3-point number is what I specifically want to harp on here. For starters, the biggest knock on him coming into the NBA was as a shooter, that he shot below 30% from college. He was a guy that wasn't a good enough passer, wasn't a good enough shooter, and from the eyes of many, he wasn't a good enough NBA player. That's why he slipped to 21st to the Sixers, and thank goodness that he did. Look at that as a rookie. Shot just 30.1% from three on 1.7 attempts per game. To grow into a 42.7% three-point shooter as a sophomore in the NBA is absurd. On 4.1 attempts, and I personally believe that there was a chance there was some regression this year. That is just ridiculous shot making. That ranked third in the entire NBA, that 42.7% in 21-22. Then to take another stride forward in your development, shoot 43.4% from three, an even better percentage on bigger volume at 6.2 attempts per game. That is really absurd stuff. To go from an 8-point per game scorer in limited minutes to a 20.3 point per game scorer last season, just in the span of 3 seasons, is absurd growth. And specifically, the shooting was the biggest question with Tyrese Maxey. He saw that, he identified it, he worked on it, and he got better. He is now a knockdown shooter. The same thing can be said about his defense, that he was not a good enough defender. Some of this is naturally he's just going to be too small for some matchups. He's going to struggle due to size. He is a guy who's just about 6'2", 6'3". He has filled out his muscles a little more. I will say that he has added some weight in a good way that will help him hold up. But there are some matchups that are going to be difficult just based on size. But I will go as far as to say that by the end of last season, Tyrese Maxey was at least an average defender for this team, and that's all we're asking for out of Tyrese Maxey. If he's just passable on the defensive end, that is completely fine with me. But that's another example of him having this specific weakness, him identifying it, him working on it, and him bringing it to the quality where the team needs it to be. I think there's a real world where that happens with his playmaking. No, we don't have evidence that he can do it. But he's also never really been asked. You even go back to that Kentucky team that he was not asked to be a point guard on that team. When he first came to the Sixers, that Ben Simmons was the guy that he was playing next to before the holdout, obviously. But he went through the length of the season with Ben Simmons, who was obviously a guy who wanted the ball in his hands, was a playmaker / point guard himself, back in when Ben Simmons was still a functioning NBA player. Then in comes James Harden. James Harden's obviously a guy who's going to take those playmaking reins. This is a guy who led the NBA in assists last year, who has led the NBA in assists 3 times in his career. These are things that you can throw on his plate and he can handle it. But there were definitely times last year where Tyrese Maxey became a bit of a waste, where just having him in the corner, being a spot-up three-point shooter, is not a good enough use of his talents. He's just too good for that to be his role. That's what I'm excited for this year. So rinse me of the James Harden bad vibes. Put it all on Tyrese Maxey, and let's see it happen. Now, I will say I do feel a little, bad in the regard that there is a lot of pressure on this kid, that he has checked every box and gone well and beyond it every step of the way. It feels like that if he's not like an all-star, there's going to be guys disappointed this year, which is a high bar to hold him to. But I do think he's built for it. I do think he has the work ethic to overcome it and prove that he is that caliber of guy. And I just think he is that caliber of guy, that he can be a number 2 on a championship team. I don't think right now, I don't think this season, but I do think in the long term, he can grow into that caliber of player. That's how good Tyrese Maxey is. And I also, by the way, think there's a little bit of Tyrese Maxey not understanding how Tyrese Maxey how good Tyrese Maxey is at this point. That there were times last year where he would be hot and he would be deferring to James Harden and Joel Embiid. I get it. These are two guys that are league MVP caliber players and have been doing this for quite some time, are these superstars. I understand. But I think there's a point where Maxey might realize, like, I am that guy. Like, I am going to be a 25-point-per-game scorer this year because he will have the opportunity to do so, and he will deliver. So I think as Tyrese Maxey realizes the leaps that he's already taken, as he puts the pieces together, as we have more creativity with Nick Nurse in the half court and getting things involved, everything is pointing to another breakout season for Tyrese Maxey. If you don't know the name Tyrese Maxey by now, you should on a national stage. That I think the ESPNs, the national audiences are going to fall in love with this guy because there's nothing not to love. From a personality standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a basketball standpoint, Tyrese Maxey is about as perfect as you can get. That he does check every single box that a team should look for, a fan base should look for, and I'm so grateful that he fell to the Sixers with that 21st pick. Shout out Mike Muscala for banging that shot, for making that three-pointer going in and giving that Sixers that pick in the first place. And shout out the rest of the NBA for allowing him to fall to the Sixers. I really do believe that if Tyrese Maxey was not on roster right now, the Sixers are absolutely blowing things up. That they are trading Embiid, they are recouping everything. He is the last straw, that last point of optimism that they have to stick to, that we will see if it is enough to drive. If that is enough, we will still is still to be determined. There's plenty still to find out about this season. But regardless of how bad things get in the James Harden, I can't wait to watch Tyrese Maxey this year. We will see what happens from here. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Once again, make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and we'll be back bringing down the rest of the Sixers here on Sixers Digest. Peace.